This video will talk a little bit about why the primary connotation and secondary connotation distinction matters. And the reason it's going to matter is because it'll help us understand vagueness and why there's often miscommunication among people. So here's something I'll write down. Okay, so vague words often have rich primary connotation. Oh, whoops, sorry. Often have unclear, that's a very different word, unclear primary connotation and rich secondary connotation. Okay, now, what do we mean by this? The book uses a nice example. They use the word feminist, or, well, feminism. Now, the word, like, a lot of people will disagree about what the precise definition or primary connotation of the word feminism is, and everybody will agree that there certainly is a rich secondary connotation, meaning there's a lot of properties commonly associated with feminist, and they have a lot of like emotional appeal too. So the book gives a lot of examples on page 37, this whole long list here. Okay, now rightly or wrongly, whether these properties should be associated with the word feminist, they are commonly associated with feminism or the word feminist. Okay, and so that's why the book says the word feminist is vague because of the rich secondary connotation and the unclear primary connotation. And what that can lead to is misunderstandings among people. Somebody might say, I'm pro-feminist, okay? And another person, because they don't have a clear primary connotation or definition of the word, they'll be like, what, you're a feminist? And they'll be thinking about this big, long list here. Okay? They'll be like, oh, man, you shouldn't be a feminist. I'm anti-feminist. And they might start arguing with each other. Okay? And that's what happens with vague words. Okay? And it's going to create a lot of miscommunication in our political discourse. Okay, now, how do we solve this? Here's Dr. Moon's recommendation. I think in a lot of our conversations, we should be asking a lot more of this question. What do you mean by that? Okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, and if you ask that question, then you can actually help clear out a lot of miscommunication. So in the feminist case, the pro-feminist person can be like, oh, what do I mean by feminist? I mean the view that men and women should have equal rights. Okay? Now the person who was originally anti-feminist could be like, oh, is that all you mean? Men and women should have equal rights? Yeah, then sure, we do agree. Like, okay, if that's what you mean, I am feminist and I'm on board. Okay? And then they can agree. Whereas if they just hadn't gotten that clear and clarified, they would have been talking back and forth and like maybe even like started arguing and got upset with each other. So what are we doing right now? It's step one to how to reason well. What we're doing is we're clarifying the claim. So, and this is a case where it's really important, especially with vague words. And you could do this with a lot of vague words that are used in cases where people are getting upset with each other. Somebody says they're a Trump supporter. Okay? Now, that word is going to have a rich secondary connotation because the word Trump supporter has a lot of properties associated with it. So being a Trump supporter might be associated with supporting the Capitol riots. It could be associated with being very anti-immigration and hating immigrants. It could be associated with something like being QAnon supporter. Okay, now could you be a Trump supporter and be against the Capitol riots and against QAnon and all that stuff? Sure, you can. Okay. Now, what I would hope though is if somebody says, "Yeah, I'm a Trump supporter," the other person can be like, "Okay, now what do you mean by that? What exactly are your views? Like, what parts of Trump do you like and not like?" And then you can clarify the claim, and then hopefully that might actually diffuse a lot of the tension. Now, sometimes, even after clarifying the claim, you might still find disagreement. Like you might say, someone might say, "Oh, by feminism, I mean men and women should have equal rights." And then the other person says, "Oh, I don't think men and women should have equal rights." Well, now you got a real disagreement, and now you can have a actually maybe hopefully a fruitful debate. Now, whether you'll actually be able to resolve that, at least you know what each other is talking about. Okay, so this is going to work for all sorts of claims. Claims like whether someone's an evangelical Christian, uh, or take terms, expressions like Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. We could talk more about these, but all of these slogans have rich secondary connotations that actually kind of lead people astray. And so if people just said, "Wait, what do you mean by this claim?" And then you clarify with each other, and then that'll make a lot of progress. I'm not saying it'll solve everything, but it'll make a lot of progress. So that's a value of distinguishing primary and secondary connotation, um, kind of exposing vagueness and then trying to clarify from there. So, yep.